In a bold move to counter China's grip on global maritime industries, the U.S. Trade Representative's Section 301 investigation has unleashed sweeping tariffs on Chinese shipping and shipbuilding. Starting October 2025, hefty fees will hit Chinese vessels and operators at U.S. ports, while incentives aim to resurrect America's once mighty shipyards. Can these measures revive U.S. maritime power and challenge China's dominance? Stay tuned for the full story. On April 17, 2025, the United States Trade Representative, USTR, officially released the results of its Section 301 investigation into China's practices in the maritime, logistics, and shipbuilding sectors. Launched in April 2024, the investigation aimed to determine whether China's dominance in these industries was achieved through unreasonable or discriminatory actions, policies, or practices that burden or restrict U.S. commerce. The release of the investigation results and related tariff measures marks a significant shift in U.S. maritime policy toward China. According to the USTR announcement, the tariff measures target Chinese shipping operators, China-manufactured vessels, and shipping companies with orders from Chinese shipyards. These measures will be implemented in phases to weaken China's market dominance in global maritime, logistics, and shipbuilding sectors, while encouraging the development of the U.S. shipping and shipbuilding industries. Tariffs on Chinese shipping operators. A service fee will be imposed on Chinese-flagged vessels or vessels operated by Chinese companies each time they enter a U.S. port. The fee will be calculated based on the vessel's net tonnage or a fixed cap. Effective from October 2025, the fee will increase annually. For example, a 10,000 TEU container ship with a net tonnage of 100,000 tons would face a first-phase fee of $10 per net ton in October 2025, totaling $1 million per port entry. By 2028, with the fee rising to $92.4 per net ton, the cost could reach $9.24 million per voyage. Tariffs on operators using China-manufactured vessels. Operators with fleets containing China-manufactured vessels will be charged based on the proportion of such vessels, calculated by net tonnage or container numbers, with fees increasing yearly. For instance, a global shipping company like Denmark's Maersk or France's CMA CGM, with over 50% of its fleet built by Chinese shipyards, could face up to $1.5 million per port entry starting October 2025, depending on fleet size and net tonnage. For a 300,000 DWT very large crude carrier, VLCC, at $1,000 per net ton, a single port call could cost up to $100 million. Since most global shipping companies use China-manufactured vessels, this measure will affect nearly all major operators, not just Chinese firms. Tariffs on operators ordering Chinese vessels. Operators ordering vessels from Chinese shipyards or expecting delivery from Chinese shipyards within the next 24 months will face fees. If the proportion of Chinese-built vessels is less than 25%, a fee of up to $500,000 per vessel entering a U.S. port will apply. If above 25%, the fee rises to $1 million per vessel. For example, a European shipping company ordering 10 new vessels from Chinese shipyards in 2025, with over 50% of its orders being Chinese-built, may face $750,000 to $1 million per vessel entering a U.S. port. This could significantly increase operating costs, potentially pushing the company to order from shipyards in countries like South Korea or Japan. Incentives for U.S. manufactured vessels operators using U.S.-built vessels will receive service fee exemptions, and the proportion of U.S. exports transported by U.S.-flagged vessels must gradually increase, at least 1% starting in 2025, rising to 15% after 7 years. For example, a U.S. shipping company using American-built vessels to transport exports like agricultural goods to Asia would avoid the port service fees, gaining a competitive edge over rivals using Chinese-built vessels. 3 years after implementation, 3% of U.S. exports must be transported by U.S.-built, U.S.-flagged vessels, increasing to 5% after 7 years. Operators proving 20% of their cargo is transported by U.S.-built vessels can gain permission to use non-U.S.-built vessels for exports. Additionally, the announcement calls for reducing reliance on China's national transportation and logistics platform, Log Inc., restricting its access to U.S. shipping data, and banning its use in U.S. ports. The USTR also recommends investigating potential anti-competitive behavior by Chinese shipping companies. If U.S. ports cease using Log Inc., they may need to develop or adopt alternative logistics systems, increasing short-term operational costs and potentially reducing logistics efficiency temporarily. The primary tariff measures will take effect in October 2025, with some restrictions like the U.S.-built vessel quota phased in over 3 to 7 years. In March 2024, 5 major U.S. unions, including the United Steelworkers, submitted a petition accusing China of gaining dominance in maritime, logistics, and shipbuilding through non-market practices like government subsidies, harming U.S. industrial interests. On April 17, 2024, the USTR formally launched the Section 301 investigation. On January 16, 2025, the USTR released its report, concluding that China's global shipbuilding market share had grown from less than 5% in 1999 to over 50% in 2023, controlling 19% of the global commercial fleet, 95% of maritime container production, and 86% of intermodal chassis, posing a burden or restriction on the U.S. economy. Under the Trump administration, which has continued and intensified the Biden administration's trade policies toward China, these high tariffs and restrictions aim to revive U.S. shipbuilding, reduce reliance on Chinese supply chains, and enhance national security and supply chain security. However, since most global shipping operators use Chinese-built vessels, these new tariffs are likely to increase U.S. import and export transportation costs, potentially exacerbating inflation pressures for a period. Historically, the U.S. was a shipbuilding powerhouse during World War II. From 1941 to 1945, the U.S. built around 5,000 merchant and military vessels, with no opinion data showing U.S. shipbuilding tonnage accounting for 60–70% of the global total. In 1943 alone, the U.S. produced 19 million gross tons, far surpassing the combined output of Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan. This industrial might provided a solid foundation for the Allies' victory over the Axis powers. However, starting in the 1950s, the rise of Japan, Europe, and later South Korea in shipbuilding eroded U.S. market share. By the 1970s, U.S. commercial shipbuilding had fallen to 5% of the global total, relying heavily on government subsidies and the Jones Act 1920 to protect domestic shipping routes. To support the industry, the U.S. implemented subsidies like Construction Differential Subsidy, CDS. Introduced under the Merchant Marine Act of 1936, it subsidized up to 50% of the cost difference for U.S. shipyards to offset higher labor and material costs compared to foreign shipyards. Operating Differential Subsidy, ODS. Subsidized operating costs for U.S. shipowners to encourage the use of U.S.-built and U.S.-flagged vessels. Government Loan Guarantees. Under the Merchant Marine Act of 1970, low-interest loans were provided to stimulate commercial shipbuilding. However, the 1970s global shipbuilding market shrank due to the 1973 oil crisis, and Japan and South Korea rose rapidly with government support, further weakening U.S. competitiveness. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration, favoring free market policies, reduced government intervention and cut direct subsidies. Starting in 1981, the CDS program was phased out and fully terminated by 1982. The CDS had previously covered up to 50% of the cost gap. U.S. shipbuilding costs were about double those in Japan at the time. The U.S. Maritime Administration, MARAD, ceased providing CDS funds, forcing shipyards and shipowners to bear the full cost of new orders. Unable to compete with low-cost rivals like Japan and South Korea, U.S. shipyards saw a sharp decline in orders. During the 1980s, the number of U.S. shipyards dropped from over 300 to under 100, losing around 40,000 jobs. The subsidy cuts also eroded economies of scale and technological competitiveness, a decline from which the U.S. has yet to recover. By 2023, the U.S. shipbuilding industry's global market share was a mere 0.05%. In contrast, China's shipbuilding industry was just beginning in the 1980s with a global market share of 2% to 3%, primarily building small bulk carriers with low technical expertise. By 2000, through its 11th and 12th five-year plans, China invested heavily, around $90 billion from 2006 to 2013, in subsidies like land grants, low-interest loans, and export credits. Combined with large-scale domestic steel production and low-cost labor, China rapidly captured the global shipbuilding market. Its military-civil fusion strategy enabled state-owned Giant China State Shipbuilding Corporation, CSSC, to efficiently build both commercial and military vessels, far outpacing the U.S. In 2023, China's shipbuilding industry held 55% of the global market, 33 million GT per UNCTAD data, and 74.7% of new global orders per MIIT data. China built around 1,700 vessels in 2023, including container ships, LNG carriers, and warships. It now excels in high-value shipbuilding, such as ultra-large container ships, Icon class, and LNG dual-fuel vessels, with CSSC alone accounting for 23% of the global commercial ship market. President Trump has clearly recognized this crisis. Though in office for only 3 months, the Trump administration has introduced several incentives to revive U.S. shipbuilding. On April 9, 2025, President Trump signed the Executive Order on Restoring America's Maritime Dominance, a cornerstone policy outlining a comprehensive maritime action plan, MAP. The plan requires the National Security Advisor to coordinate multiple departments, including Defense, Commerce, Transportation, and Homeland Security, within 210 days to develop a strategy to rebuild U.S. shipbuilding, expand the U.S.-flagged commercial fleet, and strengthen maritime national security. Key initiatives include Maritime Security Trust Fund, provides long-term funding for shipbuilding projects, sourced from tariffs, port fees, maintenance fees, fines, or taxes. The fund will support infrastructure upgrades, workforce training, and fleet expansion. Shipbuilding Financial Incentives Program offers tax credits, loans, and guarantees to encourage private investment in U.S. shipyards, repair facilities, and dry docks. Maritime Prosperity Zones. Modeled after Trump's first-term Opportunity Zones, these zones aim to attract investment in ports and coastal communities to boost shipbuilding-related industries. Additionally, in March 2025, President Trump announced the creation of the Office of Maritime and Industrial Capacity within the National Security Council, NSC, to coordinate government efforts to revitalize shipbuilding. This office will oversee MAPI implementation, integrate resources, and ensure shipbuilding becomes a priority for national security and economic policy. The Bipartisan Ships Act, proposed by Democratic Senator Mark Kelly and Republican Senator Todd Young, has gained widespread support. It aims to revitalize shipbuilding through federal oversight, funding, workforce development, and tax incentives. The Trump administration has endorsed the bill, incorporating it into the MAPI strategy. The Shipbuilders Council of America, Eastern Shipbuilding Group, and unions like the United Steelworkers have welcomed these executive actions and the broader domestic shipbuilding plan. A March 2025 Morning Consult poll conducted for the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AAM, found that 72% of Americans support rebuilding the shipbuilding industry to reduce reliance on China, 68% see shipbuilding capacity as a national security issue, and 71% support government investment in the sector. This broad public support provides a strong political foundation for the Trump administration's initiatives and the implementation of subsequent policies. The USTR's Section 301 investigation results and tariff measures are the latest continuation of this policy, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz stated at a recent cabinet meeting.
Last year, the Chinese received 1,700 orders for new ships. American shipyards received 5. Under your leadership, like so many other industries, we are going to revitalize and make shipbuilding and maritime great again with these blue-collar jobs.
So, do you support the Trump administration's initiatives to rebuild the U.S. shipbuilding industry? Do you think they will have a positive impact? Welcome your comments and unique opinions. Thanks for you watching. We'll see you next time.